What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for coming back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about Marvel's latest installment to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Captain Marvel. So before I get too far into my review for Captain Marvel, I just want to go ahead and say this part right here. This is not a spoiler, and I will not be giving any spoilers in this review. But I did want to say, because I was pretty surprised at the amount of people in the theater that did not know this, I think you should know walking into this movie that it is a prequel. It takes place in the 90s, and it kind of, has some great connective tissue to the rest of the franchise. But just before I got too deep into the review, just so you guys know, this movie is a prequel. It takes place in the 90s. I think it's very important. I knew that going in, but I guess a lot of people didn't know that, and I'm sure some people will be confused by that, especially when it comes to the very ending of Infinity War and how this movie ties directly into that film. So let's get into my review, guys. Right out of the gate, I can go ahead and say I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I thought it was a great time. If I had to kind of rank it in my mind compared to other Marvel movies, I would say I put it somewhere around above mid-tier of the Marvel movies. Some people may feel differently about that, which is completely fine. But yeah, I thought it was a really good movie. I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought it had some great action, some great special effects, some great performances throughout. The narrative is where it's a little wonkier for me, but I'll get into that now as we keep talking. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I thought it like I said, a lot of fun. It was great to look at, and Brie Larson really grew on me as Captain Marvel as time went on. So yeah, this movie stars Brie Larson as Captain Marvel. You got Samuel L. Jackson reprising his role as Nick Fury. You have Gregg Clark coming back to play Agent Coulson. You have Ben Mendelsohn in here also as one of the antagonists, and Jude Law as well. Just a really, really great cast all around. It was great to see returning characters and to see the new characters. I was absolutely always loving the idea of the Skrulls coming to the big screen. I wanted them to be a part of the MCU years ago, so to now finally see the Skrulls as have a presence in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is an amazing time. I thoroughly enjoyed seeing them on the big screen finally after all these years of seeing them on the comic pages or video games or in cartoons and all that kind of jazz. It really is great to see them on the big screen in live action form. So right out of the gate, I'll go ahead and say that my biggest positives about this movie are that it just has it's a very entertaining story, I think, for the most part. There's a few moments that have some boring lulls that I thought were a little bit slower than others. But for the most part, I was engaged in everything that was happening. I enjoyed the fish out of water story that happens with Captain Marvel and her being on Earth. And I won't get too deep into what that narrative is surrounded by, but there is this great fish out of water sense in the movie, and that's something that I've always enjoyed. Marvel's able to do very well. They did it with Captain America, they've done it with Thor, and yeah, I think this movie it falls in line with those great some tropes that you expect to happen in that kind of a story, a fish out of water story. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed seeing Carol Danvers' version of that. Right out of the gate, too, I wasn't super pumped on Brie Larson as Captain Marvel. I have a lot of trust for Marvel and their casting department and what they're looking for when it comes to these different characters. So I didn't go into it with some sort of negative mentality. And I do love Brie Larson in other films. I think she's a fantastic and talented actress. So I knew that she would, bring it when it came to playing this role. However, what I can say is I feel like because of the kind of character she had to play and the kind of dialogue that the movie had, for her character, she did feel a little bit held back compared to the other performances I've seen Brie Larson give. But I did enjoy her performance, and as the movie went on, she did grow on me as the character. Yeah, but leading up to it, based on the marketing and stuff like that, I was still very excited. But I just definitely, more than ever before, I feel like I was kind of a little worried to know if I was gonna fully like her as a character. Whereas on most other occasions, when a character or an actor has been cast to play a Marvel character and I've seen them for the first time on the big screen, I'm already all about it. They get me from scene one. So Brie Larson did take a little bit of time for me, but I don't think that'll be something for everybody. I think that the movie does set her up to be a pretty cool character right out of the gate. So that's just my one thought on that. Another thing I was really impressed by in this film was Samuel L. Jackson's de-aging CGI that they did on him for Nick Fury. Like I said, this movie does take place in the 90s, and Samuel L. Jackson is, I believe, about 70 years old at this point. And so I know that they did de-aging. They showed some behind-the-scenes footage with the dots on his head for the motion capture and all that kind of stuff, so they can go in there and fix up the his age on his face. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed seeing what they did with that. It blended in so well, and he did look younger. So yeah, props to Marvel's CG department and the special effects department overall. because I think they did a really good job with this movie. There is about maybe one or two moments, one that I can specifically remember, where the CG was kind of stood out as like not being as strong as the rest of the film, but it didn't take me out of it too much, and I still thoroughly enjoyed the visual effects that this movie had to offer. One thing I could definitely say is I love the action in this movie. All the action that does happen is a lot of fun to watch, and there are some highlights, but for the most part, I felt like the action wasn't, how do I say it? There wasn't as much of a big action set piece that you remember, kind of like with various other, Marvel films. You can remember, oh, that fight or this big action sequence. Where this one did have moments, don't get me wrong. There's definitely some great action moments, but there wasn't any big action set pieces outside of the end and a certain moments in the end where really stood out to me. So I guess I was hoping to see a little bit more like big action set pieces, but the movie really didn't need it, and so I can't fault it too much for not having it there. As far as going to my negatives, which I don't really have too many of, I would say there were times, like I mentioned before, that Brie Larson's performance felt held back, and in doing that, her character could feel a little bland at times, not easily as relatable or one of these heroes that you instantly latch on to. So I am very excited to see how they integrate her now with Avengers Endgame and the future MCU films that she will no doubt be a part of. She's obviously going to be a great and huge part of the MCU going forward for them, and yeah, I'm really excited to see how they integrate her and the different character interactions that come with the kind of character that she has. Since the movie was focused on her and there was this very much fish out of water narrative, she could come off a little one-notish and bland at times, and I don't really fault Brie Larson for that. I fault the writing more than that, but I feel like because it's her first installment, I think that there was a lot of elements that they kept true to the character from the comics while also bringing a new and different vibe to it all. And I am thoroughly excited by the end of this film to see her integrated in with the other characters and have those interactions, and also her power skill set is just insane. Going into it, I was like, oh my god, how are they going to bring such a powerful character from the comic books who's done incredibly powerful things into this whole mix? You know what I mean? Little minor spoiler for a post-credit scene of Infinity War, if you haven't seen that already, which I'm sure most of you who are watching this have. They obviously kind of send out a signal for Captain Marvel at the end of the post-credit scene for Infinity War. So, there's a reason that they're calling her, because she is a badass. And so I'm really excited to see her skill set and her power set, which is definitely shown off in this film, but not anywhere near to its full extent. Hey guys, one last thing I just wanted to throw in here real quick. I was editing the video and I really wished I had said this, so I figured I'd just pick up the phone and record this really quickly. Was that one of my issues that I think I had with the last portion of the film, or the film in general, is that Captain Marvel is kind of set up, because of her power skill set, to be pretty powerful and strong right out of the gate. She is overpowered, she's OP, she's always been that way in the comic books. And so, like I mentioned, I was very curious to see how they would integrate that into this film. I think for the most part they did a really good job with it. But I think one issue that it kind of gave me was that there wasn't, though the movie set up a grand sense of stakes, there wasn't really any sense of tension or mass sense of like dread or stakes when I was watching this movie. I felt very comfortable and confident in the fact that Captain Marvel was going to be able to handle it very easily, and in most cases she does. You know what I mean? She's just such a badass, strong character that it's kind of hard. It's kind of like the Superman effect, you know what I mean? Where it's just, you have this character that's just so powerful that it can be a little hard to write a compelling, conflict around them that makes sense, you know what I mean? And, even with that, I still really thoroughly enjoyed the movie. So you guys can get back to the rest of the review now. I just wanted to throw this in here. I'm really excited to see how they integrate that into these films with these other characters that are not as powerful as her, and how they all play off each other. I think that's going to be a really exciting thing to see play out. But as far as the negatives go, like I would say, yeah, that's one for sure. The element of Brie Larson feeling a little wooden at times. But the other thing for me too would mainly be the narrative. And I enjoy the narrative in this film. I think that it's a fun and engaging story. But I think the issue about it was a lot of the character development or impactful moments were set up by flashbacks. And I think that's an okay tactic when it comes to things like TV shows that are going to run for a longer period of time, or if flashbacks are used, you know, in not as much throughout the film. But when this film very much heavily relies on flashbacks for big, impactful sequences that give you information and fill you in on characters' backgrounds and their history together, so that makes other moments more impactful. And I think that because some of those were told through flashbacks and you weren't able to really get to see them play out in a you weren't able to see them get fleshed out and played out normally. It did take away from some of these moments that the music or just the tone of that scene would kind of, you can kind of tell that they wanted you to feel something that you really couldn't feel as much, because, you know, the way that they chose to lay out the narrative sometimes hindered their ability to really give you impactful emotional moments. So that's something that I think kind of brought the movie to a lesser part for me as far as the MCU goes, is that it's just, you know, the narrative's good. I think it's just a good, solid movie. I don't think it's absolutely anything insane. I think there are really highs, and I don't think there's really anything that's a super low, but, you know, when there are lower moments, it's just kind of like in the middle of the road. And I think as an overall, I think the movie's a lot of fun. I think that it looks great. I think that there's some great comedic moments, some great moments that expand the MCU, and I'm really excited to see what they do with this film and how they take it and mold the other films that will be a part of this whole film. I'm excited for a sequel. Yeah, I really walked out of this with a smile on my face, but at the same time, nothing absolutely insane. I don't think it's one of the high-tier MCU films that, you know, everybody will be super screaming about. I can see some people maybe not being as fond of this movie, depending on their expectation levels walking into it, and you know, what it is that they're looking for when they walk into this movie. But I was just walking in looking for a good time, and I walked out very happy. You know, there are some things I didn't like that I won't really mention here, because it's just more of like maybe some story beats or just stuff like that I think when you're watching it, you may feel like, oh, I didn't really dig that as much, or oh, that wasn't as funny. But for the most part, I think it's a good time. I think it's a good watch. And yeah, it's a little bit higher than middle of the road compared to all the other MCU films for me. You know, there's plenty of other MCU films that I would put way below this one. And yeah, I had a great time. I highly recommend it. I think that anybody who skips out on this film before Avengers Endgame is foolish. I know that some people, for political reasons and for just the fact that they maybe thought the movie looked a little bland or a little meh, are planning on skipping out on this, but I know that they're going to go see Avengers Endgame. I can't tell you anymore how foolish that would be, because you would very much miss out on this character and her backstory, and she will be in Endgame. That's already been announced. So yeah, guys, I totally recommend watching this movie. Don't miss it in theaters. It'll definitely get you excited for Endgame. I'm super excited. So if you guys saw this movie, let me know what you think down in the comments below. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and share, obviously. And yeah, guys, I will see you guys in the next video. I appreciate you guys watching. I definitely want to know your thoughts on this film. Bye-bye.